Shalom and welcome to this edition of Revealing the Truth, where we cover the headlines, the heart lines, and biblical truth. I'm your host, the Reverend Rabbi Eric Walker, and I've got a question for you. What do you think they're doing with your DNA? You send it off to 23andMe because you really want to know who you are, and you're going to compare your DNA to millions of other people looking for a trend in similar Y chromosomes, X chromosomes, certain genomes throughout your identity. And it's not like you're giving away your identity and anybody could do anything with it, or could they? And is there someone in particular that's really quite interested in your DNA? That would be Satan himself, because there is a Y chromosome marker to determine whether or not you, yes, you who are watching from around the world, and especially in the Middle East, especially in Europe, especially in North America, there's a Y chromosome marker to determine if you are in the line of Aaron. That's right, Aaron of the Bible. And there is a way to weaponize DNA so that it only targets those with a particular genetic marker. Well, why would Satan be interested in that? Because if he can wipe out the line of Aaron, the high priest doesn't come back and head up the Sanhedrin who calls for the return of Jesus. You think that this is some mysterious fictional plot? Let me tell you, it's as real as the 200 geneticists when the fall of the Soviet Union relocated to Tehran to begin the development of weaponized DNA. That is the story behind the CODIST, the best-selling biblical thriller, now available to you in the second edition on Kindle for just $2.99. I want to invite you to visit our website, ignitinganation.com. Click on special offers, and you'll find a yellow cover of my latest book, The 7 Laws of Abundant Living, Lessons Learned from the Tree of Life. I'm going to take you on a journey from the natural into the supernatural and share with you 7 laws of God that He reveals to us in the ground, in the trunk of that tree, in the branch of that tree, in the leaves of that tree, in the fruit of that tree, like you have never seen before. Take this journey with me. Click on that book cover, and we're going to ask for your email address. We won't send you spam because spam is not kosher, but we will send you the first chapter of this book. I'm delighted to have as our guest today Paul Angone, author of 101 Questions You Need to Ask in Your 20s, and let's be honest, your 30s too. Paul is one of the nation's leading voices to and for the millennial generation. He's the best-selling author of 2 books, a sought-after national speaker, and an organizational consultant who specializes in helping companies attract, retain, and develop millennials. With over 10-plus years writing, speaking, and engaging with millennials, plus a master's degree in organizational leadership, Paul has created a cutting-edge process to help organizations called Millennial Mapping. Paul is also a media spokesperson on millennials, executive coach alongside his father, Dr. Louis Angone, and the creator of All Grown, that's GROAN, up.com, which has been read by millions of millennials in 190 countries. You can read of more Paul's work there at allgrownup.com and find out more about his services at paulangone.com. You can follow him on Twitter at Paul Angone. Paul Angone, welcome to Revealing the Truth.
Thank you so much for having me on. It's an honor to be here.
Well, we're delighted to connect, and this is what it's all about. It's about connections. It's all about getting to that relational depth of connection that is more of the Acts 2 model than the model of the church today that says they're the Acts 2 model. So I'm very excited to see Acts chapter 2, the last paragraph, because the real clincher of the paragraph is, and God added to their numbers daily those being saved. And so I'm excited to talk to you about a generation that's looking to go back 2,000 years to find the depth of relationship that's meaningful, lasting, and really, truly enduring. But let's kind of take our audience on a little journey back to a young man nicknamed Anchovy.
That's right.
Tell me about what it was about your faith journey that led you to want to connect with millennials.
Oh, thanks. I grew up a pastor's kid, actually. So my dad and my mother both worked in the church, and so the church really was my second home. I went to school at the church. My parents worked at the church. I knew every building, every room, every hallway, usually getting chased by the janitor because we were making messes or something, me and my brother. So yeah, I knew that like it was my home because it was. So that's I mean that's where it started for me. And then as I grew up and started making faith my own, started asking questions, digging deeper, and really feeling like, yes, this is meaningful to me. It's not just my parents' faith; it's something that is mine as well. But it was really actually after college that I had probably my biggest struggles and biggest faith journeys. That's when really the rubber hit the road, so to speak. And I was just asking some really hard questions about, do I really live the way that I say I believe? Am I really living God's truth? Do I really believe God's promises in my life? And if I was being honest with myself, I didn't really think I did at that point. And so that was really that was the biggest faith journey for me when I stepped out of college, stepped into adulthood, trying to make it on my own and trying to figure out kind of the ambiguity of the rest of your life and what do you do with your life. And that's where that real faith struggle started for me as I progressed through that.
Paul, you bring up you actually illuminate something that's really quite significant, and that is if North America, and we look at the United States as the capital of the free world, if you will, and we look at the statistics, 72% of Americans identify themselves as Christians, but the messaging in the media, the messaging in corporate America, the messaging in the magazine, in print, is not, and our government is not equally represented. Why isn't 72% of the Senate conservative Christians? Why isn't 72% of the Congress conservative Christians? Why isn't 72% of all the presidents we've had along the way representative of the population that identifies themselves as Christians? How did we get prayer thrown out of school? How did we get same-sex marriage? How do we get legalized abortion? How did this happen in a nation that says they're a Judeo-Christian nation? Because the messaging to young people is, we're not a Judeo-Christian nation. We have pornography is legal, gambling is legal, drugs in certain states are now legal. The messaging is so unbiblical, so contrary to what the walk of a believer is supposed to be like, that I can imagine that this was like walking out of a season in your life that where you knew the light, but you didn't recognize the darkness.
Yeah. Yeah, I think you're right. Yeah, it was a season of I think just a lot of struggle and questions where, I felt like the Psalms were my main go-to in the Bible because I resonated with the struggling occurring in the Psalms, not just the praises, but also the lamentations and the struggles. And obviously they were going through more intense things than I was. But those feelings of hopelessness or those feelings of depression, or, I think it was more of an inward struggle in that sense. And I definitely think that's taking place across the nation and across the world. It's a struggle in the mind and the heart and the spirit of depression and anxiety and fear and hopelessness. And that's something that I come across every day as I work with millennials really around the world that are struggling with this kind of inward struggle in their own lives.
It's interesting that you bring up the Psalms. The Psalm that is actually one that is a clarion call to understanding what the struggle is, and that's Psalm 13. And that is, how long, O Lord, will you forget me forever? How long will you hide your face from me? How long must I wrestle with my thoughts and every day have sorrow in my heart? How long will my enemy triumph over me? Look on me and answer, O Lord my God. Give light to my eyes, or I will sleep in death. My enemy will say, I have overcome him, and my foes will rejoice when I fall. But I trust in your unfailing love. My heart rejoices in your salvation. I will sing to the Lord, for he has been good to me. That is, I think, in my mind, encapsulates the struggle that people say I don't hear from the Lord, but I just heard from the Lord, and so did you, because I get to hear from him every time I open the book.
Yeah.
And when we kind of put that into that reference point that we can hear from God He's given us the script. You know, when Jesus says, I only say what I heard my Father say, this is where he heard it. Now we get to hear the same things. So how did you come out of that? Because you took from what sounds like ashes and you turned your ashes into dancing and your
Yeah.
mourning into laughter.
Yeah. I think it first started with being honest with the struggle and with some of the harder questions and not running away from those, but actually sitting in them and asking them and praying through them, almost like the psalmist did there, where they were honest about the struggle, but yet they made this kind of even so, this may be true, even so, I may be feeling this. I'm still going to stand on God's promises. I'm still going to stand on that hope and that faith because I know that's realer and more true than even what I'm feeling or feel like I'm going through right now. So I think it was that progression for me of trying to figure that out for my own life, but wrestling with that and what I call warring for hope and warring for faith and pressing into that, even though I didn't feel like that or it didn't feel true with my physical eyes, just really pressing into that and believing that. And that was a journey and that was a process, it's one that I'm still doing today as I go through struggles.
Well, actually, it's what we all go through. We all walk out our salvation with fear and trembling. And I think when we establish that as a point of understanding so that people realize that this isn't an anomaly, you're not in really any different place in questioning, challenging, searching, looking for answers than every other believer, but most won't admit that they aren't really as transparent as this generation of those born in the 80s and 90s want transparency. They want confession. I see them so much as Jesus was this age, right? And he was saying, confess your sins one to another, and God is faithful to forgive our sins. This is the whole concept of we're relating with a millennial icon, if you will, in the very teachings of Jesus, which is all about relationship and all about being different and making a difference and having your difference recognized. This was the message of Paul to Timothy and the writings of James as to how Jesus said, let your light so shine that man would see your good works and bring glory to your Father in heaven. That it should be meaningful. Who did you go to for, and who did you share these thoughts with and these struggles with?
Yeah, and what you just spoke on, I think, is really true and on point. And I think that is a struggle. Before I get to your question, that millennials are struggling with, I think, organized church or organized religion because they're looking for that authenticity and that transparency. And I think that is becoming a big hang-up for this generation, is that that church isn't talking about both sides of the Psalms. Sometimes, they're talking about the good stuff and they're all hyped up on coffee and donuts and singing these amazing worship songs, but then we're not really openly talking about the struggle and the pain and the frustration and how do we deal with that. So I think that lack of transparency and that lack of authenticity is becoming a disconnecting point between even leaders and the younger generation. And that's true in corporations too, and in the business world as well. I see the same thing where in the past, I think leaders were told to be strong, to not show their weakness, to not have any doubts, to show that they have it all together because they were this pillar of strength. Well, now I think it's shifted. I think millennials want to know about your weaknesses. They want to know about your doubts. They want to see the struggle so that they can trust your strengths. So then they can believe your strengths because now they know that you're not this superhuman. You're an actual human. And I think millennials have seen leaders fall too many times and have seen things crumble around them too many times to know that if it feels too good to be true, and if somebody feels perfect, well, then that's the biggest problem of them all. So I do think it's a shift in the leadership dynamic that is taking place in organizations across the board, and especially in the church. So I think leaders that can press into that struggle and open up that conversation, because that's what millennials are looking for. And I'm often saying that millennials are struggling, but we're struggling to make it appear like we're not struggling, because we're all playing this game through social media, especially, and that's a big shift for this generation of showcasing your life every day and how amazing it is, which maybe is blocking that authentic connection as well. So I think that authenticity, transparency piece is such an important one for any leader that is looking to connect with this next generation.
You bring up some incredibly valid points and valuable understanding into this generation. I came out of the 50s and 60s and graduated college in the very early 70s. And we thought we were a new paradigm. We brought a new paradigm. I came out of the Jewish community. We consider ourselves the first post-Holocaust generation. So this was radically different to the Eastern European upbringing of our families, who now were in the new world and were hip and were understanding. And probably by the time that we were maybe 13 or 14, we had a better education than our parents had, even if they went to college. We had already obtained a better education. By the time I graduated college, it was light years beyond. And when I went to corporate America and spent 35 years managing and directing, you're exactly right. It was strong leadership. It was immovable. It was unwavering. It was goal-oriented. It was relevant to accomplishment, to exceeding goals, and how much did you exceed the goal? Not are you happy? Are you making a difference? Are you involved in the community? Sure, we had the fundraiser for the American Heart Association, the fundraiser for the United Way, and we did those kind of things, and everybody did their part to give or make a commitment to maybe serve one day a year, but that was really it. And the model for the Jewish community is always been good works, community centers, hospitals, but works and philanthropically oriented. But from a relational standpoint, meaningful relationship, it was almost something that you didn't ever cross that line in business, because it was going to be an HR violation. You had a social relationship or an outside the workplace relationship with your subordinates. So my peers, the other vice presidents, the other directors, well, we did things together, but it was unthinkable that I would have be invited to go have coffee with one of my employees. That was just not the model. And I worked in corporate America for 35 years. And that was still not the model when I left after I went into ministry. So yeah. I completely understand that. So the real operative words to the millennials is community, relational, and relevant. That seems to be the when you triangulate something, okay, now you're able to pinpoint when you triangulate. Are those the three triangulation? Are those the three pillars, if you will, of the millennials to help us understand the framework they're working on?
Yeah, I think so, and I think you said it well. I would maybe point to that relevant piece, that relevant point of the triangle, and I think that becomes a tricky one, so to speak, because I think sometimes in the pursuing of relevance, especially in a church setting, where church wants to be relevant to meet millennials or whoever they're trying to reach, if that portrayal of relevance does not feel, again, authentic. So I think it actually has to be authentic to the culture and the personalities and the people of that church. Because if it comes off of, we're going to be relevant, so we're going to have the hippest music and we're going to have the fog shows and we're going to have all these events, but it feels fake. It feels like, oh, we're putting this on because we want millennials to come, because we want them to think we're cool. Well, millennials are really good at smelling that out. They have been marketed to and advertised to more than any other generation, ever, and it will continue to grow for the next generation. So they're really good at smelling out what is not true, what is false. So I do think it has to be relevant. It has to be, it has to speak to where they're at. But hopefully the way that it's communicated and portrayed is in a authentic, transparent way again. Because again, I think that will trump whether it appears to connect or not. Because then it might just be relevance for relevance sake, but then it's irrelevant because nobody wants to go and hear it because it feels false, it feels fake.
I'll share with you, I just came back from Israel, and a young man who I consider to be like a son to me has launched a ministry called the Beautiful Land Initiative. And they clean up the beaches in Israel. They clean up the city parks in Israel. This is what they do. This is their ministry, is they gather together young people, millennials, to go out and do something. And they put up a video every week of these mounds of trash. And now the mayors of each one of the communities are coming to them and saying, hey, will you guys come to our community? And other Israelis see them doing that and say, what are you guys doing? Well, we're cleaning up the beach. Well, we want to clean up the beaches. We hate the fact that the beaches are trashed every weekend. We hate that. We love this land. So the Beautiful Land Initiative. So after they gather together, now they have time together. They've shared a service project, if you will. This is not overt evangelism. This is not overt church. This is relational. Sharing something that makes it's a immediate reward, because they can look at this square footage that when they took the original picture, when they videoed it, it was littered with plastic bottles and everything from a weekend of Shabbat and everybody going to the beach and leaving their trash and thinking somebody else is there to pick it up, and they don't worry about it. And that's not been the case. And so the beaches have been trashed. And so this is growing to the point where it's known that he is a Jewish believer, and the news is now covering it. And this is something that's breakthrough in Israel, because they're quite opposed to Jews coming to faith in Yeshua or Jesus. So it's phenomenal. Now, there's no overt evangelism involved in this program. It's not based on that scenario. It's based on that pillar: community, relational. We've been in the dirt together, and the before and after, all right, that's relevance. It's not about, I almost want to call it the Christcapades. You go to the Icecapades, all right, everything's on the surface. They're doing the twists and the twirls, and the music's fabulous, and the lighting's amazing, but it's the Christcapades. I've been and I've preached in some of these phenomenally big churches, and I'm a much different kind of preacher than others. Mine's Old Testament, New Testament, the fullness of the Word of God. It's a very different connection point. I'm almost anti the hermeneutics and homiletics of today, where it's two verses and then you spend a lot. I want to tell you the Word of God. So I've been there, and I find that we're becoming a biblically illiterate nation. We're becoming a biblically illiterate church. We're becoming a biblically illiterate, and illiteracy in the natural world brings about poverty in the spiritual realm. And that's where we're going, and we have to find a way to feed the hungry. And this generation is desperately hungry. We've got a literacy problem, we have a spiritual poverty problem, and we have a connection point. And this is why I believe the suicide rates are going up, the detachment syndromes are going up. It's because we're not connecting, and we need people like you, exactly like you, to connect. I'm an old guy, okay? I understand this problem. That's why we want to bring light to it on our program and reach the nations with this message that the dynamic is different and the messaging is different.
Yeah.
We're talking to Paul Angone, author of 101 Questions You Need to Ask in Your 20s and Let's Be Honest, Your 30s, and also the best-selling author of 101 Secrets for Your 20s. fabulous resources for this generation, and I'm going to add for the parents and the pastors of this generation to understand the framework under which their mind works, how they process differently than you. We're masters at the love languages, but we're not masters at the millennial language. And it's the same dynamic. If we cannot speak a language in which they understand and can relate to, we've lost them. We're speaking a foreign tongue, and we will not reach them. We're going to take a short break, and when we come back, we're going to visit with Paul Angone and talk about some of the questions and the answers found in this incredible resource for you. We'll be right back. Shalom. I'm the Reverend Rabbi Eric Walker, Executive Director of Igniting a Nation and host of the daily TV program Revealing the Truth, seen live every Monday through Friday from 9 a.m. to 1 p.m. Central Standard Time at www.ianbn.com, and then replayed throughout the day and night via our website. All of our segments can be seen on the Igniting a Nation YouTube channel. Since our launch in January of this year, we've expanded our global reach to over 54 countries with a social media following of over 125,000. Our commitment is to bring you the most in-depth interviews with authors, subject matter experts, and thought leaders from around the world. We have interviewed guests from Israel, Brazil, England, India, and all across North America. All of our authors are featured on the Books and Media page on our website, www.ianbn.com. There you can find a direct link to the book you want to order, and we receive a small commission directly from Amazon. There is no cost to you for this service. In addition to our daily teachings and interviews, we make available to you the archive of all of the interviews on our YouTube, Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram channels. Our live program is available from our homepage, and there is never a charge to you for any of this access. We made the decision long ago that we would remain a commercial-free resource that would not be influenced by any pressure from any outside company. There are only two ways that we are able to continue to operate this ministry and provide you with the only live 4-hour daily Christian television talk show program. The first is through your support and tax-deductible contributions to Igniting a Nation. These can be made directly through the donate button on the website or sent through the mail to Igniting a Nation, 2700 Corporate Drive, Suite 120, Birmingham, Alabama, 35242. The other way we support the program is by offering you a unique opportunity to have access to over 10 years worth of teachings on a subscription basis. The teaching archives contains all of my prior sermons, Torah studies, prophecy in the news videos, and much more for the low subscription price of $5 per month. This subscription grants you unlimited access to over 800 hours of content not available elsewhere and is updated weekly with the most current prophecy classes. In addition to 20 hours of original TV programming each weekday, we invite you to join us live every Monday, Tuesday, and Thursday evenings for our Prophecy in the News classes. The times and locations are listed on our events page on the website www.ianbn.com. Every day you and I are faced with the challenge of where we will go to hear the truth. We are committed to bring you the only program of its kind that covers the headlines, the heartlines, and biblical truth. We cannot do this without your support. Since we launched on January 5th, 2017, we have aired over 300 individual teachings, interviews, and commentaries not available anywhere else. We are now working side by side with almost every major Christian publishing house to bring you the most in-depth feature interviews possible. Our 1-hour features address every subject that affects the believer's life. We are hearing of salvations from the Middle East, Africa, and all across the United States. Lives are being changed every day, and we have only just begun. Our mission is to become your trusted resource and grant you access to the people, tools, and information you need to grow in your relationship with the Lord. You can help us by liking us on social media and through your financial support. We know you have many choices in who you support, but we are prayerfully asking you to consider helping us keep revealing the truth, true to our calling, to cover the headlines, the heartlines, and biblical truth like no other program available. Donate today and help us bring the message to the four corners of the earth. Visit www.ianbn.com and donate, buy a book, or subscribe to our teaching archives. Without you, we do not exist. Shalom and welcome back to this edition of Revealing the Truth, where we cover the headlines, the heartlines, and biblical truth. I'm your host, the Reverend Rabbi Eric Walker, and we're talking to Paul Angone, author of 101 Questions You Need to Ask in Your 20s, and let's be honest, your 30s too. Paul, welcome back to the program.
Oh, thank you.
Paul, we've been talking about, kind of setting the stage here for an understanding of this generation we call millennials, but they don't want to be called millennials, do they?
No, they don't. Yeah, research, I just was talking about this last night actually at a speaking engagement that according to Pew Research, Pew does a lot of different research studies. They said about 60% of millennials don't identify with being a millennial or don't want to be called a millennial. So even the word millennial in and of itself is a little off-putting. It's wrapped up with so many stereotypes and generalizations, a lot of them negative on the headlines about how millennials are entitled or narcissistic or self-absorbed. And so there's a lot of negative baggage that comes with the word. So that's actually why, my books are 101 Secrets for Your 20s and 101 Questions You Need to Ask in Your 20s. And let's be honest, your 30s too, because really I'm more focused on a time of life, of an age, a time of transition and change when you're going through, what Meg Jay, the psychologist, called the defining decade of your life in a famous TED Talk a few years back. Just there's so much going on in your 20s and early 30s, in your adulthood years, kind of these early formation adulthood years, that I think it would be better for all of us to, whether you're 66, 76, 50, to go back to that place in your life and whatever age it might be. Maybe it was at 45, but that age where you felt like you were going through a lot of change, or the world that you knew went away. Maybe you were working at a company for 20 years, then you got laid off and your whole world kind of collapsed, your identity collapsed. And I think that's what a lot of millennials have been working through. But I think Gen X and Boomers have worked through this as well, but it may be at different stages or in different ways. But I think that's a better connecting point to say, hey, has there been a time maybe when you were 25 that you didn't have it all figured out? Can we talk about that rather than I'm a millennial, you're a boomer. Well, we grew up in different times. I don't get you. You don't get me. We don't like each other. Let's call each other names, because that's just what we seem to do now. And it doesn't help that authentic connection like we were talking about before, those relationships. It's not a helpful place to come from.
You bring up so many amazing points, and we could really talk a lot about this, but I do want to get to your book. You bring up the concept of OCD in your book.
Yeah.
And it's not and I will tell you that my point of view of OCD, the obsessive compulsive disorder, if you really had it, you would call it CDO, because you'd have to put it in alphabetical order. Otherwise, so
that's a good point. Yes.
If you really had OCD, you would have to rearrange the letters in order to make them right if you really had it. So, I've always questioned that with psychiatrists. I've got a psychiatrist coming on after you. He and I joke about that he loves the fact that I really understand the OCD mentality, and they would have to rearrange the letters because it just wouldn't work for them. But your definition of OCD is a little bit different.
Yeah, I call it a different kind of OCD. I call it obsessive comparison disorder, and I do think this is having a huge effect on this generation, especially. And comparison's always been around. That's nothing new. We've always been comparing ourselves with each other in our community, with who is doing better, who has more stuff, who has more sheep, who has more goats, cows, land, whatever it might be. But now, in the age of social media, we can compare ourselves at an instant global level to everybody in our sphere of influence, or even outside of our sphere. We're just constantly in this comparison game. And so what I see our generation doing is trying to keep up with these images of not necessarily who has the biggest house or who has the best car, but almost who has the most awesome life, who has the most amazing life, who is doing the biggest things, who is traveling with their laptop and working on the beach because that's their job, they're a freelancer. That is kind of the new pinnacle of success in some ways. And so you see many in my generation, we're all putting what I call our PR spins on our own social media frameworks. We're our own PR agents trying to put these spins of our lives that it looks really amazing. And like we said before, I think that's blocking that authentic connection, and it's actually isolating us because if we think everybody else is doing more amazing than us, we feel worthless. We feel like, well, I'm actually not accomplishing any of these things. I'm just making it look like my life is amazing, but actually I'm really struggling, but I don't feel like I can talk about it. So I write about obsessive comparison disorder. I write about that in 101 Secrets to Your 20s and also 101 Questions You Need to Ask in Your 20s. And I think this is a big issue for my generation to work through, but also even for leaders to understand that as they're leading and working with millennials as well.
As a manager of millennials, would I become sensitive to giving them opportunities? Would that be motivational, that I would pay attention to giving them things that give them, I don't want to call it bragging rights, but that's the old term for it, to give them encounters which are significant enough to enhance their social media presence or to reflect positively? Is that something that when you counsel corporations, is that something that you add to the equation, saying the team building, the trips, those kind of things which we consider to be perks back in the day, are they more relevant and motivational today to engage people outside of the office structure into meaningful encounters and doing things like, the whole team going out and helping out at a ranch for abandoned horses, and we all get out there and we all pitch hay and we all shovel manure and we film this whole team thing, and then afterwards we have this big bonfire and this barbecue dinner and we tell about the story about the horse that we were involved with. Is that something which would be motivational in a corporate environment?
Yeah, I would say so. Yeah, when I'm talking to leaders at corporate environments or leaders even in church settings, I am breaking down what I feel like millennials, or I think this younger generation, what they fear most. And I think what they fear most is insignificance, and especially in the workplace. So you're right. I feel like they want to matter in their job. They want to be heard. They want their work to matter. So they do want to feel that purpose, that meaning, and even if it's an industry where maybe it doesn't feel like, well, we're not feeding the poor, as our job, but yet unpacking the purpose, unpacking the meaning, couching responsibilities and processes in this bigger context of here is why this is important. Here is the impact this is having on our community, on our world. And couching all of that in there. And then, maybe doing the special, projects as well. And so instead of doing team building exercises just to do team building, to have, again, what's the point of this? What's the purpose? How can we actually take this much deeper? Because you're right, that will have huge effects, first of all, on retention rates and on engagement rates. And I think employees in general, but especially millennials, when they feel like, okay, this is significant. I'm a part of something important. This has meaning to it. This has depth. And it's not necessarily about, how much money they're making. It's more about this feeling of, this is significant to me. And it's a nice perk when they can share this on social media and feel like, I'm involved in this. I definitely feel like that gives them the sense of joy and meaning. And really, that's what it comes down to. It's that feeling of significance, which a lot of corporations miss. They miss that relational side too, where their significance happens through the relationship with my boss, through getting to know them as people, feeling like they know me. And so it's, if you give a millennial a raise, that might not do anything to retain them. That actually might be making them leave even quicker, because now they're more ingrained in a job that they don't feel is important. So now they might be looking to exit even faster. So there's much deeper things going on here that don't take extra money per se, but more time and probably more intentionality than we're used to.
Paul, back in the day, networking was exactly how you climbed the corporate ladder. It's how you moved as a skills merchant from working in, I was a director with AT&T and wound up moving to a higher position at Hewlett-Packard. You know, it was through networking. It was through knowing people and having a network which was an interactive network. I fed them and they fed me. But you kind of talk about the shift from networking to relationshiping. How does that look? What does that mean?
Yeah, I guess I was wrestling with networking as a whole, because I hated going to networking events. I hated feeling like, oh, I got to perfect my elevator pitch. And that was, I was told, you got to perfect that elevator pitch where you're just going to convince this person across from you that you are the most amazing thing since the invention of sliced bread. And they're just going to want to roll out the red carpet and fund your idea or give you a job or whatever it is. And there was so much pressure and anxiety, and I felt like I'm this car salesman and I'm trying to give out my business card as fast as possible to get somebody to buy into what I'm doing. And I think a lot of my generation struggles with that, where we don't want to be that person. We don't want to go to those networking events. It just feels, again, fake and inauthentic. So for me, I think it was a beneficial switch, and a more productive switch, to say, let's stop networking and let's start relationshiping. And what I mean by relationshiping, it's just bringing it back more to the tenets of what it means to build a quality, authentic, real relationship. And so how do I even do that with somebody I'm meeting for the first time? And maybe it's at a quote unquote networking event, but maybe instead of me working on my elevator pitch, I'm just going to, for the first 5 minutes, 3 minutes, I'm going to try to ask them so many good questions that I won't even talk about myself at all. I'm not going to share anything about myself. I want to get them talking about them. I want to serve them in this conversation. I want to give them a place to talk about what's important to them. And I feel like then that actually creates a more meaningful connection. They might actually like you so much more. You might not even have said a word, and they might come away from that conversation thinking, man, that person, he was so amazing. I really connected with them, and they didn't even realize that you didn't even say a word. So I like that idea of relationshiping, and I do think it's more productive in today's world to create those more meaningful relationships where then you are also a connector, and you're connecting people with each other, and you don't even benefit at all. You see these two people, and they would really benefit to know each other. And so you connect them. And then in the end, they both think fondly of you, and it does help you. It does create a deeper affinity for yourself, but you're not in it necessarily for that. And so it was a helpful switch for me, and I think a more effective one when even forming our careers, because now we're building more authentic relationships about serving others.
Is there any gospel centricity to your approach in the book, or has it become gospel neutral and references the model of Jesus, or is it really more of a generic approach?
As far as the book in and of itself, or just the relationship part,
the book itself? The book itself.
Yeah, no, I do infuse, in 101 Secrets to Your 20s and 101 Questions You Need to Ask in Your 20s, I am infusing a lot of faith and a lot of really through my own story. And I'm using my story as that vehicle to bring about the topic of faith and purpose and hope, and how I'm wrestling through it, and how I'm going through it, and how I feel like it applies to my life, and maybe even applies to the world as a whole. I'm doing that kind of through the vehicle of my story. So instead of being a devotional book, which is going to lay out all the Bible verses that's going to completely back up this statement, I'm coming at it a little bit more of a nuanced way. I feel like just a little bit more of a story-driven way, so that I'm allowing Christians and non-Christians alike to engage in this conversation where they're feeling hopeless or they're feeling depressed, and then they're feeling that tug of hope and purpose, and they're seeing that struggle of faith being worked out, so that then they reach out to me and they ask me deeper questions. Or I'm always encouraging them to reach out to mentors or their friends and wrestling with these questions, so that I'm hopefully engaging them in a relevant conversation that's not so filled with Bible verses that they might not be able to understand, or they might even just shun right away when it's like, oh, well, here's all these Bible verses. Well, I don't want to know about the Bible. I want to know why I can't get out of bed in the morning. When obviously the Bible has been a big part for me of getting out of bed in the morning, but how do I infuse this in a way that this generation can hear it? The language without watering down the truth.
Right.
So yeah, it's a balance. And some people will read my book. I think my first 2 one-star reviews on 101 Secrets for Your 20's was one gentleman saying this book was about God. I felt lied to. I hate God. I hate religion. I hated this book. And then my other one-star review was, I thought this was a brother in Christ. I thought this was going to be a Christian book. This is such a heathen book. It's not about God at all. So I had 2 one-star reviews about the same exact topic of faith.
Right.
But saying completely opposite things, that I was over the top, Bible, beater. And then on the other one, I was a heathen who didn't know God at all. But, it was about the same book.
Well, I'll give you my review.
Yeah.
Okay. After reading your book. All right. I believe that your book fulfills a passage of Scripture, and it's 2 Samuel 14:14. And I don't know if you're familiar with it, but I'll tell you what it says.
Yeah.
It says, like water falls to the ground and does not return, we all must die, but God does not desire that. He devises ways for those who are estranged from Him to return. I believe your book is one of the ways that God has devised to reach those who are estranged from Him to return. And for the hope of every parent out there that has a child that's drifted, this is the kind of book that you want to put in their hands, not a Bible. You don't start in building relationship by proposing marriage. You start a relationship by having a discussion. That's where it begins, at the discussion, not at the proposal. When you first meet somebody, you may think this is the one I'm going to marry, but you don't propose to them the moment of contact. You don't put a Bible in the hand at the moment of contact. And I truly, Paul, I want to tell you, I truly get that. And I see the error of our ways for many generations in trying to reach every generation, the next generation. I, as a Jew, people trying to put a Bible in my hand to tell me about Jesus, don't approach a Jew and tell him that he's going to die and go to hell and that Jesus Christ came to die for his sins, because we're going to rattle off that 6 million of our people got killed, and then you had the Crusades, and then you had the Spanish Inquisition, and you tell me what about Jesus that's life-saving for me when I can show you statistically that millions of us have died.
Yeah, exactly.
I resonate with that, and I think our approach has been all wrong.
Well, thank you.
And I want to see parents of millennials buy this book and give it to their child and say, I thought you'd be interested in this. When I was a kid, it was Ripley's Believe It or Not. So that I love that book, and so every kind of holiday, that was what I would get, was the new edition of Ripley, because I like the bizarre and the interesting, and that kept my attention. Your book kept my attention because I'm asking these questions. My daughter is coming to visit me for Father's Day. I'm giving her this book at 29 years old, because what's the best way to know if you're actually ready to get married? What's the future? Where's the future of work headed, and what does it have? What does having a successful career look like today? How do I make a choice when I don't know what to choose? Why do some people have great marriages while others have complete wrecks before they even make it to the highway? Am I seeing the other side of people's Instagram photos? Nobody has a photo album of the tragedies. Nobody has a photo album sitting out. Nobody has a Facebook page of nothing but weeping and crying and gnashing of teeth. It's all about this great picture, this great food, this great, telling you the greatest, because I'm in this OCD, this obsessive comparison disorder. What are the pivotal plot points of my story? And all these things are outlined in this book. We've got about 2 minutes left in this segment, and I want you to speak right to the both the adult, the mature adult, and the millennials that might be watching from around the world
Yeah.
right now.
Yeah. Well, thank you. And again, thank you for that. That was an honor to hear you talk about the book. I really appreciate that. And you're right. This book is for parents and 20-somethings. And a lot of people that leave reviews are parents who are saying this book helped us connect in a way that we hadn't before. It's an honor. But yeah, for parents and anyone watching this, first of all, it's like I said before, we're all struggling, but we're all struggling to make it appear like we're not struggling. And I feel like this is a huge lie that we have to break through, that you're not alone in the struggle. You're not alone in the frustration and the doubt and the pain and the stuff that you're working through. So as I write in the book, you have to tell people where you're going. Don't go on this exploration, this adventure all by yourself. Bring people along the journey with you, because we're not meant to go at this alone. We're not meant to carry these questions and these doubts and fears by ourselves. And reach out to God with your honest questions. He's not afraid of them. He's not going to be, embarrassed and red in the face because you're asking him hard questions. He wants to talk. He wants to talk to you. So don't go at this alone, because you're going to fail a lot in your 20s and 30s and in your life. You're going to fail all the time. But when you fail, we can't call ourselves a failure, because you're not. You're learning. You're on the path. You're on the process. And really, success in your 20s and your 30s is more about setting the table than it is about enjoying the feast. You're setting the table. You're preparing the way. You're planting the seeds. You're starting to see them grow. And you don't even know where it's all going to take you right now. You can't see around the bend and the next bend. So take that next step faithfully. Dream big, but be faithful in the small. And that's really what resilient success is going to look like. But take people along the journey with you, because you don't go at it alone. We're not meant to do it alone. So, and reach out to somebody. It could be me. It could be anybody, a mentor in your life. But reach out to somebody. And hopefully, my books become a resource for you. The 101 Secrets to Your 20s or 101 Questions for Your 20s to help you along the journey, to be a guide that comes along with you as well.
Well, thank you, Paul Angone, for being with us, author of 101 Secrets for Your 20s and his latest book, 101 Questions You Need to Ask in Your 20s, and let's be honest, in your 30s. You can find him at All Grown. That's GROAN grown up, allgrownup.com. Paul Angone, welcome. Thank you for being with us here on Revealing the Truth. It was a delight to talk to you.
Oh, thank you for having me.
God bless you, my friend.
All right, you as well. Thank you.
Bye. And we're going to take a short break, and when we come back, we'll bring you the next edition of Revealing the Truth.